My mother-in-law took our infant daughter without permission, got her ears pierced behind our backs, and then tried to punish us by filing a false CPS report when we called her out. My wife, 31F, and I, 33M, had our first baby girl, Ava, 7 months ago. She is the light of our lives, and we've both been very clear about the kind of parenting we want to practice: gentle, respectful, and most of all, safe. From the very beginning, we agreed that any major decisions involving Ava, especially medical or bodily changes, would be made together and only with both of our full consent. One of the things we agreed on was not piercing her ears as a baby. Neither of us is against pierced ears in general, but we felt strongly that Ava should have the chance to make that choice for herself when she's old enough to understand what it means. We saw it as part of respecting her autonomy and her body. Now, my mother-in-law, let's call her Linda, has always had a strong personality. She's very traditional, often pushy, and has a way of making herself the center of attention. Even before Ava was born, Linda would comment on how bare ears on baby girls look sad, and say things like, "In my day, we pierced them before they even left the hospital." We always brushed it off, thinking it was harmless old-school talk. We were wrong. Linda has a strained relationship with my wife. It's not openly hostile, but there's tension. My wife has always been the more independent sibling, and Linda doesn't like being questioned or contradicted. So, when we became parents and started setting boundaries with her, especially around Ava, things started to simmer. We didn't want to cut her out of Ava's life. Despite everything, we thought she deserved to be a grandma. We thought maybe she could learn to respect us and our parenting style. But 2 weeks ago, Linda crossed a line so far beyond what we thought she was capable of that I honestly don't know how to process it anymore. It happened on a Wednesday. My wife had a dentist appointment that afternoon, and I had back-to-back work meetings, so we needed someone to watch Ava for about 2 hours. Linda had been asking for more alone time with her granddaughter anyway, so, reluctantly, we agreed. Before she came over, my wife reiterated a few simple things. No taking Ava out of the house without telling us. No visitors. No changes to her feeding or nap routine. Linda nodded along and acted like everything was perfectly reasonable. "I'm not stupid," she laughed. "I raised 2 kids of my own, remember?" We handed Ava off, and my wife left for her appointment. I was in a Zoom call for work and didn't notice anything strange at first. About an hour later, I got a weird feeling and checked my phone. I had 2 missed calls from my wife and a text that said, "Call me now. My mom isn't at the house with Ava." I immediately called her back. My wife sounded panicked. The dentist had called to reschedule her appointment last minute, so she came home early, only to find the house empty. No Ava. No Linda. No note. Nothing. We both tried calling Linda. No answer. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. My wife was already shaking and close to tears. I tried to calm her down and said maybe they just went for a walk. But deep down, I was terrified. Finally, after 40 minutes, Linda called us back like nothing was wrong. She said, "Oh, with them all, I thought I'd surprise you too by taking Ava out for a little grandma-granddaughter day." My wife's voice cracked as she asked her, "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you answer your phone?" Linda responded casually, "You said no visitors. I didn't bring anyone else. And I turned my phone on silent so I could enjoy the moment. Honestly, you two are way too overprotective. It's not a big deal." I jumped in and told her to come home immediately. She acted like we were being ridiculous. "She's fine. I bought her a cute outfit. We're just getting some pictures taken at the photo kiosk." I wanted to scream. When Linda finally came home, about 20 minutes later, my wife ran out to meet her. Ava was asleep in the stroller. At first glance, everything seemed fine. Then my wife saw the tiny gold studs in our daughter's ears. She froze. Did you pierce her ears?" Linda beamed like she had just won the lottery. "Yes. Aren't they adorable? I had it done at Claire's. They're super clean and gentle." "You're welcome." That was the moment something broke in me. My wife stood there stunned, and I could feel the blood drain from her face. She didn't even speak. She just picked Ava up and went inside. I looked Linda dead in the eyes and said, "You had no right." She rolled her eyes. "It's not like I hurt her." She cried for a second, then stopped. "You two are being dramatic." I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I told her calmly but firmly, "You violated our trust. You went behind our backs, and you did something to our daughter's body without permission. That's not love. That's control." She scoffed, muttered something under her breath about us being woke snowflakes, and walked back to her car. We thought the worst part was over. It wasn't. That evening, after we'd calmed Ava and put her down for a nap, my wife and I sat together in stunned silence. Neither of us could believe what had just happened. I kept replaying the moment Linda said, "You're welcome," like she had done us some sort of favor by ignoring our wishes and taking our daughter to a mall kiosk to have a needle pushed through her ears. My wife was quiet at first. I could tell she was still processing. Then it hit her like a wave: anger, betrayal, and grief all at once. She started crying and said she didn't even ask. She didn't even think about what Ava might want. She just did what she wanted. We decided to call Linda that night to confront her again. I offered to be the one to speak, but my wife said, "No, I need to say this myself." So she called. The phone rang twice before Linda picked up and said, cheerfully, "Oh, good, you've calmed down." I figured you'd realize it wasn't that big of a deal. My wife stayed composed. "Mom, this isn't about whether it's a big deal to you. This was not your decision to make. You violated our trust. You took Ava without telling us, and you pierced her ears knowing we didn't want that." There was a pause. Then Linda replied, "I'm her grandmother. I don't need your permission for every little thing. And frankly, I'm tired of you two acting like I'm some dangerous outsider. I raise kids, remember? You're not her parent," my wife snapped. "You're not entitled to make decisions about her body." That's when things turned ugly. Linda launched into a full-blown tirade about how ungrateful we were, how she was just trying to be involved, how we were robbing Ava of a proper upbringing by being too modern. She even said, "You're making a big deal over earrings. They'll heal in a week. Get over it." My wife's hands were shaking at that point. I took the phone and said, "We're not going to argue about this. We're telling you plainly, you went too far. From now on, you won't be seeing Ava unsupervised. Period." Linda's tone turned cold. "You can't keep me from my granddaughter. That baby is part of my family. If you're going to treat me like this, maybe I should talk to someone about what's going on in your house." I remember blinking in confusion. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer directly. "Let's just say, if you're going to accuse me of being unsafe, maybe I should have some concerns of my own." My stomach dropped. I thought she was bluffing, just throwing out empty threats. My wife took the phone back and said, "Mom, if you even think about calling CPS or the police over some made-up complaint." Linda cut her off and said, "Maybe I already did." The line went dead. We sat there, staring at each other in disbelief. Did she seriously just say that? My wife started panicking. "Do you think she actually called them?" I want to say no. I wanted to say she wouldn't do something so spiteful. But something about her voice, her entitlement, her willingness to cross boundaries, we couldn't take the risk. We decided we needed to be prepared. And less than 48 hours later, Child Protective Services knocked on our door. It was a Friday morning. I had barely finished feeding Ava her breakfast when I heard the knock on our front door. I figured it was a package or a neighbor, but when I opened it, my heart dropped. Two people were standing there. One was a woman with a clipboard and a calm, professional demeanor. The other was a uniformed police officer. The woman introduced herself as a caseworker from Child Protective Services. "We received a report and need to ask you a few questions," she said gently. "Is now a good time?" My mouth went dry. I didn't even need to ask who made the report. My wife came to the door, holding Ava. The caseworker explained that someone had called anonymously and reported potential neglect and emotional abuse in the home. The report claimed our daughter was often left alone for hours, that she cried constantly and was ignored, and that we were unstable and unfit parents. It felt like being punched in the chest. We invited them in. What else could we do? I sat down on the couch, my wife next to me holding Ava, while the officer stood quietly nearby and the caseworker began asking questions. We answered everything honestly. We showed them Ava's room, immaculately clean. Her bottles were sterilized and organized, her diapers stacked neatly, and her baby monitor was active. The fridge was full. Her pediatrician records were available. We even had a whiteboard calendar with her nap and feeding schedule. The caseworker looked around, nodded slowly, and said, "I don't see any signs of concern here." Then she asked, "Is there anyone who might have a reason to make a false report?" We told her the truth. We told her everything that had happened with Linda. The unauthorized outing, the ear piercing, the argument, and the last phone call where she hinted she had already contacted someone. The caseworker sighed, like it wasn't the first time she'd heard a story like this. She said, "Unfortunately, we have to take every report seriously, even ones made out of spite." The officer, who hadn't spoken until then, finally added, "It's a good idea to document everything from here on out. Texts, voicemails, any communication, keep it all." They left after about 45 minutes. No action was taken against us, and the caseworker confirmed that based on her findings, the case would likely be closed within a week. But the damage was done. We didn't sleep that night. The thought that someone could just make up lies about you, and that it could lead to police knocking at your door, was terrifying. My wife kept checking the baby monitor over and over again, as if Linda might somehow break into our home and try to take Ava again. We changed the locks the next day. What really broke us, though, was the betrayal. Linda hadn't just crossed a line. She had jumped over it, lit it on fire, and danced in the ashes. She weaponized the system out of pure vindictiveness. She risked her own granddaughter's safety and our mental health just to get revenge for not being allowed to do whatever she wanted. That's when we knew we couldn't keep hoping she'd change. We couldn't keep trying to maintain a relationship for the sake of family. She had become a threat. After the CPS visit, everything changed. We weren't just shaken, we were done. The next morning, my wife sent Linda a long text. It was the calmest, clearest message she had ever written. She told her that her actions were inexcusable, that we could never trust her again, and that she would no longer have any access to Ava. Not visits, not photos, not updates. Nothing. She was being completely cut off. Linda didn't respond right away. She waited almost 2 full days. When she finally replied, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a denial. It was a wall of text that started with, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," and ended with her blaming us for being too controlling and dramatic. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge that what she did was wrong. Instead, she doubled down. She said that we had turned Ava against her, even though Ava is a 7-month-old infant who can barely sit up on her own. She said we were robbing her of her role as a grandmother. She even compared being cut off to losing a child. That last part made my wife snap. She wrote back, "You didn't lose a child. You lost access to ours because you abused our trust and tried to hurt us with lies. That was your choice." We blocked her number after that. We also talked to a lawyer. Even though CPS closed the case without incident, our attorney suggested we keep documentation in case Linda tried something again. We filed a formal complaint with the police, not pressing charges, but requesting a report be created. That way, there'd be a paper trail. We changed all our emergency contacts with a pediatrician, daycare, and even the pharmacy. We told friends and extended family not to share photos or updates with Linda. Some relatives on her side thought we were going too far, but when we explained what happened, many were horrified. One of my wife's cousins, who used to be close with Linda, texted us privately and said, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would go that far." There were still a few people, mostly older family members, who try to play peacemaker. "She's still family," they said. "She just made a mistake." Or worse, grandmothers don't need permission for things like that. No, just no. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an overstep. It was a deliberate act of defiance followed by a vindictive attempt to damage our lives. That is not what family does. That is not a mistake. That is manipulation and abuse. We knew we had done the right thing, and yet we still mourned. Not for the relationship itself, but for the fantasy that Linda could ever be a safe person in our daughter's life. We had given her chance after chance. We tried setting boundaries. We tried communication. We tried inclusion. And she responded by violating our wishes, endangering our child, and nearly tearing our lives apart with false accusations. She made her choice. Now we're making ours. For weeks after everything happened, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. My wife was quieter than usual, always holding Ava just a little tighter, always locking the door, even if we were home in the middle of the day. I started waking up at night to check the baby monitor more often than I'd like to admit. Even though we knew we were safe, our home was secure, the CPS visit had gone fine, and Linda was blocked, it didn't change the underlying sense of violation. Someone had tried to tear into our family from the inside, and that kind of betrayal doesn't disappear with time alone. My wife blamed herself more than she should have. I caught her staring off sometimes, whispering things like, "I never should have let her babysit," or "I knew she was pushing, but I thought she'd respect at least this." I reassured her every single time that none of this was her fault. We had both trusted Linda in good faith. We gave her a chance, and she threw it back in our faces. The thing that really gutted us was how many people tried to minimize what happened. Some said we were overreacting. Others said, "It's just earrings." A few had the audacity to suggest we were making Linda's life harder than necessary by cutting her off. But here's what those people didn't see. They didn't see our daughter scream when we had to clean her ears. They didn't see my wife crying in the kitchen after CPS left. They didn't see how Linda smirked when she told us we were too dramatic. They didn't see her using our love for Ava as leverage to hurt us when we didn't let her have her way. It wasn't about earrings. It was about control. Thankfully, not everyone took Linda's side. Some of the people we least expected became our biggest supporters. My sister, who usually stayed neutral in everything, told us she would have gone full scorched earth if someone had done that to her kid. A friend of mine, who's a social worker, said false CPS reports are one of the cruelest forms of family retaliation, and that we did the right thing by shutting Linda out immediately. Even our pediatrician, when we told her what happened, was visibly horrified. She said, "No one should be taking a baby for a piercing without the parent's consent. Ever. That's not love. That's crossing a serious boundary." It was validating to hear that. Sometimes, when so many people are trying to gaslight you into thinking you're the problem, you need someone outside the bubble to remind you that you're not crazy. We also joined a local parenting support group, one that focuses on family boundaries. Talking to other couples who had gone through similar betrayals helped more than I expected. Some had stories far worse than ours, but all of them had the same common thread. A toxic relative who thought their title, grandparent, sibling, cousin, gave them the right to override the parents. I don't think we'll ever go back to who we were before all of this. We're more guarded now, more cautious, but we're also stronger. We've become fiercely protective of Ava's peace and our own. Linda burned the bridge. We didn't tear it down. But now that it's gone, we're finally breathing again. It's been about 3 months since the whole situation unfolded, and things have settled down, at least on the surface. Ava is doing great. Her ears healed without any complications, though we did end up removing the studs just a few days after the piercing. We didn't want to let them stay in just because they were already done. That felt like continuing a choice we never agreed to. So, with the help of her pediatrician, we carefully took them out, cleaned everything properly, and they've since closed up naturally. She's happy, growing fast, and, thankfully, will never remember any of this. But for us, the emotional scar lingers. We haven't spoken to Linda since the day she sent that manipulative message. She's still blocked on everything, and we've made it clear to family that we will not tolerate any attempts to mediate or pass along messages from her. If she wants access to our daughter, or even just a conversation, she can apologize. Genuinely, fully, without excuses. She hasn't. From what we've heard through the grapevine, Linda is telling anyone who will listen that we overreacted and that she's being punished for loving her granddaughter too much. Apparently, she's even hinted that she might take legal action to get visitation rights. Though our lawyer assured us that in our state, grandparents' rights don't apply unless there's a pre-existing custodial relationship where the parents are unfit, which obviously doesn't apply here. Still, the stress of that possibility lingers. It's like a shadow we can't quite shake. Some days, my wife asks me if we did the right thing. Should we have given her another chance? Should we have just laid down firmer rules instead of cutting her off? And every time I go back to the same thought. She didn't just overstep. She betrayed us. She took our child without consent. She pierced her ears against our wishes. She filed a false report that could have led to Ava being taken from us. And all of that, every bit of it, was because she didn't like being told no. There's no negotiating with someone who sees boundaries as a personal attack. Still, I'll admit this. It hurts. It hurts to think Ava might grow up not knowing her grandmother. Not because we're withholding love, but because Linda turned that relationship into a weapon. It hurts to think we tried so hard to give her a role in Ava's life, only to be repaid with lies and threats. And yet, I don't regret our decision. Ava is safe. We're safe. And no one else gets to determine what that safety should look like. We've built a calm, stable life for our daughter. That's what matters now. But I'll end with this. I still sometimes question myself. Not about the piercing, or the CPS report, or the cutoff, but about whether I could have seen it coming. Whether we ignored too many red flags, tried too hard to be polite, gave too much benefit of the doubt. Maybe we were naive, or maybe we just didn't want to believe that family could hurt you like that. So Reddit, if you've read this far, thank you. Truly. I guess what I'm asking is, did we go too far? Were we justified in going no contact? Or are we just as guilty of blowing things out of proportion as some of our relatives keep saying? Because from where I'm standing, I see a grandmother who chose pride over peace, and two parents who chose their daughter. Every time,